Good morning, everyone. So I've been trying to multitask when I make my videos, and I've made them when I've gotten ready before, but that's not always quite appropriate for me to do. I've done them during lunch, and I just prefer to pay attention to my food. So I'm going to try this, talking about books while I am on my morning walk. Okay, so the first book that I finished and haven't talked to you about is The Mummy, the Will, and the Crypt by John Bellairs. So when I was a kid, we had all these reading challenges starting in 3rd grade with undercover reading, where our class pet hamster was stolen and we had to read to find clues and figure out who stole our hamster. So it was during one of these reading challenges that I first read The Mummy, the Will, and the Crypt by John Bellairs. So basically, I wanted to reread that book as an adult and see how it held up, and it was amazing. One of the things I liked about it is John Bellairs grew up in the same town that my grandparents live, or only my grandma's still alive, but you know what I mean. And so there's a lot that was familiar about it. Like, I felt like the essence of being a kid in Michigan was in that book. So in the book, they talked about Steal the Bacon. I don't know if anyone else has played that or if it's a Michigan thing, but there's a really loud truck coming. It's like a PE game that doesn't involve catching things, which is like my jam, and I loved that game so much. I can describe it to you later if you're interested. But anyway, that game was in the book, as well as references to cereal, which Marshall, Michigan is really close to Battle Creek, Michigan, which is where Kellogg is. And I used to actually babysit the grandkids of the CEO of Kellogg, although he's not the CEO anymore because he's super old. But yeah, there was a lot of Michigan references, I felt like, in addition to those. And I actually found out that the church that John Bellairs went to as a kid is the same church I've been to a million times for family events. So if you want to know what the book is about, basically it takes place in Massachusetts, which is where John Bellairs moved when he was an adult. And it's basically this little boy named Johnny, and he lives with his grandparents because his mom has passed away, and why is everyone's garage is opening? I'm embarrassed all the time. Okay, hang on. So he lives in Massachusetts with his grandparents because his mom has died and his dad is fighting the Korean War. And yeah, so anyway, throughout the story, his grandma is suffering a lot of headaches and stuff like that, and he spends a lot of time with this professor that lives nearby, which I adore, but it's also kind of creepy if you consider it for today's time. I feel like that would not be allowed. So the story starts when he's with the professor, and they're kind of at an estate sale sort of a thing, and they discover basically that the person that is the owner of this cereal city or whatever, they basically have this huge fortune, but they haven't left a will. So there's this table in the guy's home that they're viewing as they're going through his art and stuff like that. And it has 3 clues. It has a newspaper and a chess set and a tea shop, something. So Johnny and this professor walk in on this tour group while they're viewing the home, and they're by the table that has those 3 clues. And basically the tour guide tells them that those basically are the 3 starter clues, or suspected to be, that tell the start of kind of this treasure hunt to figure out where the secret will is located, because basically this guy's money was split up between a bunch of relatives according to Massachusetts law, but that's probably not what his secret will said. And so Johnny, as a kid, becomes obsessed with finding the will, and the professor's calm down, no one has found it for years, you're not gonna find it. And meanwhile, the grandma's getting sicker and ends up having to go to the hospital for tests and things. And while that's going on, the professor decides that this kid needs to get his mind off his grandma. He needs to give his grandpa a break, who's stressed about his grandma, and he also needs to get his mind off this treasure. So the professor sends him like a week away in the mountains with Boy Scouts. So of course, being in the woods a week with the Boy Scouts would definitely give his grandpa a break and might get Johnny's mind off his grandma, but it definitely does not get his mind off the treasure, especially since there's a location really close to the Boy Scout camp that he thinks might be involved in where to find the treasure. And so the book goes on from there. It's amazing. I was like reading at a really fast pace, like as an adult, because I wanted to find out what happened, and I obviously didn't remember from when I read it like as a 5th grader or whatever. 4th grade, 5th grade, one of those two. And yeah, my only negative thing about the book is I was like basically to the end, and he still hadn't even started searching for the mystery and finding the will. So I felt like the amount of time spent on like this backstory was super good, but then I felt like the ending was rushed. And obviously it's made for kids, so it can only be so long, but I really wish that I was like double the length so that we could spend a lot more time searching for and possibly finding the will. All right, the next book I read was, I think, called The Last Years of the War. I'll put all the pictures up here, but basically it is about this girl who, she was American, but her parents were both German. She was born in America. She'd lived her whole life in America. And when World War II came, there were some things found in her dad's home and, well, in her home, and things that her dad had said, and that made the government think that he was like a traitor and that he was on the side of the Nazis, which he was not. But anyway, he got taken away, and then all this stuff happened to their family. And during the war, she ended up making friends with this other girl who was also American but came from a Japanese background. So both girls were really treated quite horribly. And they became best friends, but they lost touch after the war. So the book actually starts with the main character having Alzheimer's and really wanting to find her best friend before she loses her memory and stuff like that. And so it's her journey to find this long lost Japanese American friend, and also just like going back and forth between like the present day and World War II. And it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. My only negative about that one was I felt like everything was so perfect. Like, she had Alzheimer's and she had strategies for not letting it impact her life, but it seemed like her memory so perfectly came back all the time, and the ending was so perfect, and everything was just so perfect and not realistic. All right, so the final book I read that I wanted to talk about was a classic called Passing by Nella Larson. And there was this post by someone that I view as super ignorant, who posted about how we shouldn't have kids read classics because they're all written by white people. And that's not true. Like, we can find diverse classics and classics written by people of color. You just have to make yourself not so ignorant and become aware of them yourself. And honestly, like, this was my first classic. I think I've read modern classics, I feel like, but like a bit more dated classic written by a person of color. So like, I'm right there with that person, I suppose, in my ignorance. But the book was so amazing. So it basically is kind of the basis for The Vanishing Half by Brett Bennett, but it tells the story of 2 friends who connect when they're a bit older. They actually were more of acquaintances as kids, and they're both black, but as adults one decides to pass as white, and it is about all of the implications about that. There's so much to discuss. We're reading it for a family book club, but of course I already finished because it's a novella. It's pretty short. I'm crossing a busy street, so I'll be right back. So there were so many parts of it that I felt like mirrored how things currently are, even though it was written in the 1920s. And there's like just a lot of good discussion that I think can come out of this book. I think more people should read it, especially since it's so short. And the ending, I was not expecting that. When I got to the ending, I was like, okay, I need to discuss this with someone. So I went to Google, and yes, it was as vague as I thought it was, which I love in an ending because I think it empowers the reader to decide for themselves what happens. But then I basically wanted to discuss it with everybody because Google is not a good discussion partner. But anyway, I definitely would recommend that book. So good. And on my watch later list, I have all these videos by other YouTubers discussing it because I really want to hear their thoughts. But I haven't listened to them yet. So those are the 3 books that I read recently that I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys about yet. What are you guys reading? I think this is a fun time of year, kind of transitioning to almost summer, and just like the idea of summer reading. Oh, so amazing. So let me know what you guys are reading. And another question I have actually is this John Blair's book. I love it so much. I'm going to not reread. I've only read 2 of his. I'm going to read all his other kid books. But I'm curious, like, what other books would you recommend for adults that are like gothic, but also involve some sort of like a hidden treasure or finding something or mystery, or I don't know. Let me know what you think.